Eric.
Yes.
Do you know anyone in San Antonio, Texas?
No.
Just curious. What about Fitchburg, Wisconsin?
No.
Okay.
I have no idea where you're going with this.
You know anyone in Norway?
No.
You know anyone in Israel?
I have a lot of friends. There could be a few lads in the army overseas in Israel. They're over in Lebanon. I don't know.
Anyway, just looking at our stats for the podcast, and we're okay with the podcast, but there are people who are listening to this episode, so I just want to give them a shout out and say, thank you for listening to the episode of the podcast. It's unbelievable. I just have to see there in the stats there. It's like when we talk about the intro, I was like, just see how the stats and stuff going. Not make everything about figures and stuff like that, but you just see these random places popping up. You're kind of like, who do I know in San Antonio, Texas? Like, all right, fair enough. Thanks for listening to the podcast. I think we're approaching 8,000 downloads, stuff like that now. So we're slowly building up, and it's getting better and better. And our guests are getting great as well. And we've got a great guest on the podcast today.
Yeah, this one is fantastic, Seán. And a lot of we talked about food, and we've started trending towards the foodie talks. And our Q&A last week brought up a lot about food. So this week we have Kathryn Stewart coming on, and it was, obviously we're recording the intro after we recorded, but it was an absolute education. I actually sat here gobsmacked, and I've had to take a long look at myself. And to be honest, to give ourselves credit as well, that we have been working towards the right thing. And a lot of what she was saying is what we kind of are starting to believe now, which we haven't for years, but we've started to come around. But it is a phenomenal listen. And if you're training or not, it's how important food is, and it is a phenomenal listen in our own opinion, but I thought she was amazing to listen to.
There's a few things this episode, like, sorry Kathryn, I hold my hands up and I admit a few things that I believed in back then in terms of the myths and things like that she dispels, but there's so much knowledge in this one. Genuinely get a pen and paper for this one, because there's even different figures in terms of what you build towards, the amount of calories you should be having, and all the rest. And I don't want to spoil it too much better. I don't even want to paraphrase it, because I won't do it justice, guys. So what we're going to do is get straight into this week's episode of the Any Given Run Day podcast. Right before we do, though, do check out the description notes for Kathryn's Instagram. Ton of knowledge in that as well. With that said, guys, this week's episode of the Any Given Run Day podcast. Enjoy. So, guys, a few weeks ago on the podcast, we had a Q&A with myself and Eric, and a couple of questions came in on micronutrients and more nutrition kind of questions. And we were honest, we put our hands up and said, we don't know, we could give you layman's terms on a few things, but we're not in depth in that. And we said, we're going to find someone. Well, Eric went out there and he found someone. Eric, who do we have this week on the Any Given Run Day podcast?
Seán, this week we have Kathryn. Hi, Kathryn.
Hi, how are you?
Kathryn, how are you?
And so, as you said, people asked most about macronutrients, Kathryn, and I had a McDonald's last night, and I still don't know the difference between them. So I'm very open about how bad my nutrition is. I try to be good, but we said we'd get you on to hopefully answer some of these questions. So, Kathryn, tell us a little bit about yourself, some of your background, and all we need to know about you.
I'm always so bad at these types of things. So I'm a dietitian and also have a degree in sports nutrition. So I studied in Glasgow initially and then worked in the NHS in hospitals and things, but no one really asks you about, what their granny should eat or anything like that. They just want to know what to eat before a workout or after a workout and things like that. So at that stage I was like, I'm not going to live in England for the rest of my working day. So I was like, this will be my way out to get home. And then I came home, did sports nutrition masters, and then thought I'd work with all these sports teams and things like that. Didn't really work out like that.
I know you ended up on a podcast with us too.
I know. The world works in wondrous ways. And then so I worked in the NHS again, and then I had like a little quarter life crisis, thought I didn't know what I was doing. And then I went on holidays. I quit my job, to go on holidays for 7 weeks, which then turned out to be 5 weeks because we messed up our visas, which was not ideal. But while I was away, then I got offered a job in Dubai in a gym there. So I never wanted to go to Dubai or visit. It didn't really interest me. I thought it was all fake and there was no culture. And then I was like, I'll just do the interviews anyway. So I had 3 Skype interviews and I ended up getting the job there. So then I came back, just worked until my visa and all that was sorted, and then went to Dubai for what I thought was going to be 3 years of intense saving, and I'd come back loaded, and then COVID happened. So that was cut quite short, but it was a great working holiday, I would say. So I worked in a gym, sports facility there, but gyms out there are mental. It was like a club and a gym all rolled into one. There was like full-time DJ hired. There was like Berkeley musicians there and stuff as well. So I tried every like class that I could, because I always think maybe I'm good at a sport and I just don't know it or haven't found it yet, but we're still searching. So then COVID cut that short because it was in a gym, and then in Dubai, if you're in debt, you can't leave the country and probably get jailed. So I wasn't in debt whenever I left, but I thought, it's highly likely that not having a job, I might run out of some money. So then I ended up coming home and worked in like a COVID ward in London for a little while, and then I got offered some work with Dublin Nutrition Centre. So then I decided to go freelance there, and have been doing that since September, and I love it. Like, you get to see so many different types of clients, like from sports to more like women's health and fertility and PCOS. Periods and poo are my like favorite things to talk about, and I get to talk about them lots at the minute in my job, so very content with that.
Eric, you could ask the follow-up question there, that one, follow up that one.
I know, yeah. So now I'm just here. I live in Antrim. Love the beach. I just bought a new bike, so I'm buzzing about that. I didn't realize how expensive all the bike gear was, so we'll be building up slowly, but it
really is a shock how much of an
oh my gosh, I know, whenever I was looking it up, I was like, does this come with an engine and a boot? Like,
does it cycle itself?
Yeah, so I went to cycle this morning. It's really windy and I'm terrified now. I think like the road bikes, like you'll just like tip over if with a gust of wind, but yeah, so that's where we're at now. I live in a farm as well, so maybe I suppose that's maybe a bit of sports nutrition can be applied to that sometimes as well.
You and Seán have so much in common. Seán's rearing 6 chickens at the minute. He's getting his protein every morning.
Well, I usually get to escape most of the farming, but this morning I didn't, so it's been the calves. But they're well weaned, They actually drink. It's not like a.
The chickens is pretty much all I do around here. They don't trust me. I fed a lamb a bottle there 2 weeks ago, like a few lambs, but it's not good. I was collecting stones the other night, and I think in an hour I picked up 3, and I was like, really, is this like is this a joke? I don't know.
And obviously, before we get into it, obviously, I should have mentioned that you do have a fantastic Instagram page called Edible Evidence, edible_evidence, and that's where we found you. And it's we were recommended to you by some of your colleagues who you probably studied with and worked with in the past. So if people are listening and want to have a little look as we're talking through, that is your Instagram for Kathryn Stewart, and yeah, you can have a little look through if you're listening and looking at the same time.
We'll have that in the show notes as well, so people don't have to look at that. Just click the link and be able to go straight to your Instagram from there. Kathryn, is there? I know you were saying you're freelance and you do different things. Is there anything in particular that in the nutrition and sports nutrition field where you hear about, apart from poos and periods, where you kind of light up and you're like, that's my niche, that's my go-to, I could talk about that all day? Is there anything in particular you're like, that's my thing?
Well, I did work with a team doing Race Around Ireland, so that's probably why I was like, I think I'd really like cycling, and I loved that side of things, because it's just feeding people loads of carbs, and like usually people don't really think like, oh, that's a bit rubbish, like, whereas if you're making weight and things, like it is a little bit more difficult. So like that side of things, and then also doing, I suppose, talks for teams and things like that, and just answering general queries, because that's the whole reason I started that Instagram page, was because I kept complaining about all the rubbish nutrition information you see, and then someone said, well, why don't you play them at their own game? And I was like, oh, do you know, that's a good idea. Yeah, that's where it came from. I probably dissolve in embarrassment if I looked back to my first post, but I'm sure you got to start somewhere.
That's it. Things are always changing. Do you have a hard time with a buy-in, even something as simple as carbs? Like a lot of stuff out there, carbs are evil, low fat, keto diets. Do you find it with people doing sports and stuff, you would have that hard time to buy into more carbs?
Definitely, because I'd see like a lot of maybe student athletes at the minute, and like they'll come and say they want to improve performance, but then all of the things they're doing is specific to body composition, when actually maybe for the sport they do, like that doesn't really play too big a part in things. So I suppose there is a lot of like education, and I suppose there's like easier things to try and reintroduce, like avocados with a bit of a healthier low honey compared to, you know, a big bowl of crunchy nut cornflakes or something like that is easier to add in there as well. But I remember seeing this really useful graph, and performance was on the y-axis and carbs are in the x-axis, and it only goes up, it never goes down. So your performance always increases with carbs. Obviously people, you know, maybe want to try out fasted cardio, or it just works better for them in terms of timing wise. But yeah, I do enjoy the education side of things, especially if someone's really interested and open to, you know, learning more and new ideas that maybe they weren't kind of following previously. Can
I ask you something on the fasted thing? This is something I've always wondered. So people who are doing these fasted diets, and it puts them into the state of ketosis and stuff, as that's what they're trying to do. Essentially, are they not just cutting out a meal so they take in less calories a day so they start to lose weight? Is that? Yeah.
There's no kind of fancy thing that's working in any better way. I suppose it works for some people really well, and for others not too well. So I think I probably maybe used to be a bit more hardline in this, and I was like, oh, that's rubbish, like you shouldn't do that. But you know, it suits some people really well, and they're not hungry, you know, in the morning times. And if it means that it's not to the detriment of missing out on any other nutrients by cutting out maybe an extra meal a day, then usually it's fine. For females, maybe they need to be a little bit more careful, I suppose, because of their menstrual cycles and things. Anything that puts too much stress in the body can then scare away the periods. So things that would add stress are intense exercise, also not eating enough. So if you combine early fasted cardio, early fasted like workouts, then I suppose that's a bit of a concoction for problems down the line. So I suppose it is quite individual.
What would be your best advice for our female listeners? Because I know, and they are the ones that always get targeted with these kind of diets or fad diets. So what would be your, in a nutshell, a quick one on that one? What's your best advice on them to manage
intermittent fasting, time restricted feeding is just another way of cutting calories. So if you can do that in a way where you're maybe looking at your portion sizes, looking at the types and the amounts of snacks, then that might be a better option for you. But if you do want to go down the intermittent fasting route, then your recovery meal is doubly important. So there's no skimping on carbs in at that.
Okay, very good.
Kathryn, you were talking about there about micronutrients. You had a very good post on February 14th. You said eat food, not nutrients.
My sister can't put that up.
But it clicked, not personally, but it clicked. You knew what you were getting at. That is there a case of like you have all like vitamins and different things to have out there. When I suppose more from a sports background in terms of going into running and more long distance stuff, cycling, whatever. Is there a time where there's different? Do you have like iron deficiencies? Do you need more magnesium? Do you need vitamin D all year round, apart from just in the winter? Or is it a case of you're gonna get that through your food anyway, and you don't need those extra supplements?
So I suppose it depends on the individual, but the key one that would come to mind is vitamin D. So between, like, if you, as a rule of thumb, between Halloween and Paddy's Day, you definitely want to be taking vitamin D, regardless of if you work outside or, you know, you're maybe not training as hard, because we get it from the sun. And, you know, well, sometimes between Paddy's Day and Halloween, there's not much sun as well, but the sun definitely isn't strong enough during those winter months. So you want to be taking it during those times. So that would be kind of the non-negotiable one for bone health as well. But also there's some studies on vitamin D and aerobic capacity and aerobic fitness as well. So if I'm working with athletes and they're kind of like, oh, well, like, I don't, you know, I've never broken a bone in my life, it doesn't really resonate too much with them. If then you can bring in something performance related, then it can be really helpful. So vitamin D, probably the main one. Vitamin C, you can get enough vitamin C from 1 potato a day or a quarter of a pepper, 4 strawberries. It's really easy to get in. And actually, like the vitamin C supplements, I'm thinking of a main one that turns your pee orange have after a night out. You basically pee out the additional stuff that you take in, so it's water soluble, it doesn't stay in the body, so it's kind of a bit of a expensive urine. And then in terms of iron, those types of things, if someone follows a vegan or vegetarian diet, they sometimes need more iron, up to 1.8 times. just because the absorption's a little bit slower. So or a little bit less absorbed from plant sources, basically. So they need a little bit more. And then the other one I'd be thinking about is omega-3. So if you don't eat oily fish like salmon, sardines, mackerel, all those types of things, then you'd maybe want to consider an omega-3 supplement. But for the vast majority, apart from vitamin D, most people don't need to be taking a supplement all year round or throughout the year at specific times for training.
Just quickly on omega-3, and I know I'm going to butcher this word, but it came during the week. I don't know if it's like a marketing gimmick, what it is.
Yeah.
Polyphenol you need with omega-3, certain things. They say you need to get this and this together. And like you see, do you need that, or is it when you see a shop, you see like vitamin D's combined with calcium and magnesium? I'm like, 3 for 1 here. This is brilliant. I'll take that. Are you just taking that for the sake of taking that, like, or is it just like just get omega-3 and that's it?
Yeah. So magnesium can help with the absorption of vitamin D, and vitamin D for the absorption of calcium. But if like you're a milk lover or you take loads of calcium on and you eat a varied diet, you might not actually need that. And they're probably more expensive if they're combined. So more isn't always better whenever it comes to vitamins and supplements and things like that as well. And then you mentioned about the omega-3. So one actually that people do is they see like omega-3 and then they see omega-3, 6 and 9. They're like, here, we'll get all of them. But actually you want to focus on the omega-3 because already usually we have enough omega-6 and maybe too much. So you want to think about the ratio of omega-3 to 6. So just focus on the omega-3.
Just the omega-3. Brilliant. Just while we're on this macronutrients, just before we jump off, I suppose another polarizing one, and people claim it's the be all end all for weight loss and all the rest. Apple cider vinegar.
Oh, yes.
Good, bad, or I can see the hatred in your eyes already. Now, I will not take it. I've never taken it. I remember my dad had it for kidney stones.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's good or bad, but he had it for that. And afterwards, like, this is the good stuff, Seán. And the last time I was there, I was like, no, just try it. It's in a gummy bear. I was like, I don't want no gummy bear. And I know that gummy bear apple cider vinegar. He's like, it doesn't taste like apple cider vinegar. I was like, don't care, don't want it. Good or bad? What's the deal with it? Is it just?
I'm going to say the boring answer. No, if it's good or bad, but it's bad for your teeth. That's the main one. If you're drinking it, especially if you're drinking it neat, sounds more exciting if you say you're drinking it neat.
Apple cider
vinegar. Like it doesn't have any additional benefits. Like if there's any difference in the blood sugar response, it is teeny, and you'd be better just increasing fiber. And actually, I did actually see my dad drinking it one day, and I was like, what? I think he just must have picked up in the shop. But then now sometimes he gives it to his calves. So I'm like, do you know what? Maybe it's not all that bad. Apparently, the vet has some secret weapon there, but overall for humans, not necessary. It's a nice salad dressing if you're into that, but otherwise not much other.
Not much.
No.
So it's just one of these old tales that stood the test of time.
And it's so expensive as well. Great marketing.
You see it just all the time now. It's so dear. It's like €10 or something for a bottle of it. You're like, wow, what's going on?
And I definitely tasted nicer salad dressings. Like
yeah, I definitely would.
Unbelievable. Just on the apple cider vinegar, is there other things like that where you hear constantly? Is there constantly something like that's always being said to you? You just have to keep on debunking that. You're kind of like, no, that's not a thing.
Yeah, I know. I'm trying to think. There definitely is loads of ones. Like there's certain foods that people mention. You're just like, you don't like the taste of this, but you're just, or like, I suppose I don't want to name certain foods or like I'm thinking of, but like just things that are really health foody, expensive things that actually you could get them from your bog standard, like fruit and veg in any corner shop, those types of things.
I've been guilty of two of them in the past. I have spent the extra €3-4 on pink Himalayan salt because I thought it was better for hydration and stuff.
One. Yeah.
That's we're putting that. We're saying that's a myth. Just salt is salt.
Yeah, absolutely. Unless and even less benefits if you're colorblind. Like no difference.
Well, that's 20-year-old Seán told the difference of that one. Other one. I can't even believe I'm saying this, but I had a friend, he won't be mentioned because some people on the podcast know who it is. We used to go to the gym early in the morning. On the way back, we go around the shop, we get it. Now, I wasn't interested in extra calories, less calories. Yeah. He may have been. And I like it, but we'd always get black pudding on the roll because black pudding was a superfood.
Oh, do you know, I've never heard of that one.
It was a market ploy for a while that they said black pudding is one of those big superfoods. You had to have black pudding. And afterwards they came out and they said, no, that was just a marketing thing. You've never heard that one, no?
No, I haven't actually, but I never really eat black pudding, so we may need to look into it more. Potentially.
Don't look into what it's made of, but
like, I suppose it depends what time you're going to the gym at, if you'd want to eat that after as well. No, I wouldn't go out of my way to have it. Like a pint of milk, you'll be 5-star recovery.
Just to clarify, there's no real superfoods or anything like that. There's no,
like literally. I'm trying to think of other ones. I would have thought.
Was it blueberries? Blueberries, I think, were in that category, wasn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, not a superfood. Yeah, I suppose you could say all foods are super or all foods are bang average, but I suppose it depends on the combination of things. But generally, if you're paying like a $5 for fruit, there's no. I'm so food savvy. Like I'll spend like get the own brand of everything, and yeah. I remember in Dubai, a pot of yogurt was £5, and I love yogurt, and I was just like, I don't know how long I can fund this lifestyle. It's too lavish.
Champagne life on a level page. And that is another thing, I suppose. People are more afraid to go with own brand because they feel like something else is better quality. Now, sometimes it could be, but is there much of a difference if you're reading the back and making sure that the right stuff is there? Is there much of a difference? Can you make a big savings?
Take for instance, like tinned tomatoes. There's always 3 versions. There's like the branded version, the nice supermarket version, and then the one that doesn't have the pulley lid. I found out the hard way whenever I didn't have a tin opener trying to open one of those with a knife, and I'm just happy to have all my fingers intact. But like if you look at the back of those, they're tinned tomatoes regardless. Like, you know, apart from the pulley lid, there's not much difference in them at all, and you can see if like, you know, Equate on them or Euro on them. So and then what other things? Yeah, I suppose like organic might drive up the price of foods again, but I remember analyzing different mayonnaises. I really don't know. I think there's like a garlic mayo kind of tree in at that stage, and analyzing the different mayos, like the branded versions, supermarket brands. And actually the supermarket brands tended to be lower in fat, lower in calories, lower in saturated fat. So it's not always, I suppose, the well-known brands that are going to be the healthiest or the best option.
So not only is it more beneficial for your health, it's actually more beneficial for your pocket to start looking at what's in these foods and which one you should go for, compare the 3 yourself.
Yeah, exactly. You're probably going to have some things like, you know, baked beans and things that maybe you wouldn't negotiate on different types of brands. People are really sensitive about that. But for like, you know, tinned tomatoes, there's not going to be much difference.
Definitely not, and not with the meals that a tinned tomato is going to go into. It's usually mixed into something else, so that it's
exactly, you know, frozen and fresh. That's always ones that comes up as well. But actually, if I looked in our fruit bowl now, there's going to be some like dodgy looking apples in there, so like I wouldn't eat them. Whereas like if you bought frozen fruit, it's picked at the time where it's just ripe, and then all the goodness is locked in until you want to eat it. There's less waste as well, whereas like I'm sure loads of us are guilty of buying fruit and then it sits there for a while, or like maybe it's already dented whenever you come home, or it rolls onto the ground whenever you're putting it in the table or something like that. So yeah, also another cost saving, less waste as well.
And that's one thing I've done with a couple of our meals. Again, not an expert, never claimed to be, but I've been using frozen veg for my meal prep, and I've been you know, like if I'm using fresh peppers, I'll actually chop them myself and freeze them myself if I want the slightly larger ones. But people are kind of like, oh, but the fresh stuff is better, and I'm like, I literally read the back and it says 100% peppers. And like, there's
exactly. There's no deviation. And now there's so many good frozen options, like frozen pre-chopped, like herbs, spices, onions, all the like tedious things. So if you are time poor, but you still want to like batch cook, meal prep, and like that, I suppose it gives you more opportunity to have the time to do that, as opposed to think, okay, it's going to take me 20 minutes to like prep all this stuff, when you could just get a bag of, you know, frozen mixed veg, or even like what one am I obsessed with, like the char grilled Mediterranean veg or something. Once I shared it on my Instagram and then it was sold out for like 3 weeks, and it's not because of me. I'm not like a big influencer like that. I was just like, I'm never telling people about this again.
Yeah, if we sell out frozen peppers now in the next few months in Ireland, we'll know it was because of us.
I suppose with the pandemic and stuff like that, you might have people, I don't know, like sometimes, binge eating food, different relationships with food. We've talked before in this podcast, good food, bad food, and, label like that could lead to an unhealthy relationship. Yeah. And what would be your approach to someone who's coming to you with that and they're struggling with that in terms of, would you give them counting calories, counting macros, or is that also you're developing a bad relationship? Like, what would be your general approach before? Like, obviously everyone's an individual, but a general start, what way would you go with that?
I suppose I remember, like, in terms of would you start counting calories to kind of control that? I remember someone giving the analogy, if you're trying to put out a fire and you've got a hose or a pressure washer and someone comes along and puts petrol in it while you're hosing that, then it's going to take the whole process. It's going to take the process or extend the process, make it longer as well. So I suppose with the counting calories, then you're still putting more restrictions on your food. Right. And before binging will always be restricting usually. So the thing that you restrict is usually a thing that you binge. So like no one will say like, oh my gosh, and then I had like 3 bags of broccoli and was disgusting. Like no one ever says that. It's always like carbs, or it'll be like higher fat foods or like chocolate or crisps or something that maybe someone's been consciously trying to restrict. So usually you'll find that the pattern is maybe binging happens in the evening time, or it's usually quite secret, or and maybe at certain times of the day or after meals. But if you think that person maybe is then binged at nighttime, then they wake up the next day and think, oh my gosh, like I feel so bad, like I'm gonna like get back on track, inverted commas, I'm gonna like restrict what I eat to make up for that, and then the cycle just continues. So usually it's more balance in the earlier part of the day without even thinking about, okay, try not to binge or remove like the triggers from the latter part of the day, because usually there is a bit of hunger that's just multiplying the emotional side of binge eating as well, which can be massive too. So it is quite complex, but it's definitely something that can be overcome with the right I suppose with the right advice. So if you go to, like, say if someone's binge eating and then they go and get given a calorie target or set macros and things, then that's just imposing more rules on what's already there and can complicate things further.
Yeah, it is a tough one. And I know my mum doesn't listen to the podcast, but mum has I have a terrible sweet tooth, but I know where I get it from. But I do find like little snacks behind the couch and stuff, and she's like, oh, they're not mine. I'm like, yeah, okay. We don't
exactly. And I do think, like, I suppose there's more coming out now about like don't reward your children with food, or like give them like I suppose the treat options with the healthy options too. Like I suppose if you're in a farming family, like every like hour there is tea and biscuits, or in case someone comes around, like even the pandemic the past year when you physically aren't allowed to visit people's houses, my mom's like, there's no biscuits in this house if someone comes around, like it's like no one's coming apart from the postman. But like when we were younger, she used to hide the biscuits, and I think, oh my gosh, I was like obsessed with those types of things, because I was like, where are they at? It's like a treasure hunt to try and find them. It's like a sweet shop when you open the boot of the car, like they're not getting in the house. But yeah, I suppose it's fine, like just giving yourself permission to eat the food at that time. If you do overeat it, just it's done, it's in the past, but don't let it affect your future food decisions. And maybe even write down, like people might notice a pattern, like saying like a Thursday, like they've really long day of Zoom meetings and it's like draining and they don't have time to kind of eat maybe better meals at the earlier part of the day. They might start to notice that pattern and then try and put in maybe little, I suppose, speed bumps to slow that journey that leads to binging. So it's detangling the issues behind that, and obviously working with like a therapist who can help with that side of things too.
It's mad.
Sorry, Seán.
No, go ahead. I was going to agree that it's mad as method, but go ahead.
It's one thing as well, and it's something we have talked about on the podcast before in terms of habits and decision making, and like that, people who are busy making decisions all day in work, and they're constantly making decision after decision. When it comes to 5-6 o'clock in the evening, when you're tired, the not the bad food, the ones that's more, I suppose, the bingy foods that we all like, the chocolates, the crisps, the frozen pizzas, it becomes the easier decision, I suppose. And as we've spoken about the chopped veg, the meal prep, it's 20 minutes here, and what will I have with it? So that's, I don't know if that is the sign or is something you might have seen.
Yeah, I actually read something about that side of things, where like if you're constantly making decisions throughout the day, then you're exhausting that side of your brain. I don't know where I read it actually. And then actually just like as the day goes on, you just don't have that brain power to be like, let's think of a meal to create and those types of things. So I'd always say to people to have like 2 or 3 like quick, easy, cheap, quick meal, like beans and toast with cheese or a baked potato tuna, or, you know, something that's really quick and takes minimal time, but you kind of know, okay, that's like your, like, I suppose, quick and easy option. So there's always an option. It's not just like every night needs to be a meal prepped, balanced meal.
Yeah, and that's one thing, and something we spoke about, is that's why I started doing the meal prep, because by the time I get home in the evening, I'm like, I still have to train, I still have to cook.
Yeah.
And that's what the meal prep 4 or 5 days in the fridge. My dinner was ready in 2 minutes, and that was it. I didn't need to think
exactly. And you kind of know like what's in it, or like you've made it as well. Like I suppose I go through waves of meal prepping where I'm really organized and not so. So like probably for the past 2 weeks, I've had beans and toast for, well, yeah, probably at least like 5 or 6 times a week, and it's just quick and easy. But I definitely will get sickened of that soon. So, but that's like my, like, I suppose, go-to easy meal, or like eggs on toast or something like that. That's quick and easy, and that you kind of don't think, oh, like everything's going to pot, like I'm making bad decisions left, right, and center.
Yeah, it's very good. It's very interesting. It is, and it's just, I suppose a lot of people and a lot of the clients we would have, they do struggle with that. Now we do try and say, look, try and have a look at your calories, try and have a look at your intake, try and have a look at your habits. And, you know, sometimes we tell people, if you like chocolate in the evening, have a square, you know, have that something to look forward to. And maybe we're wrong to say that, maybe you might correct us, but I think when you tell someone you can't have any chocolate, it just becomes this battle in your brain. Well, for me, it does anyway. It's like,
it's like that thing. It's like, okay, like whenever someone, was it in a book I read or something, it was like, okay, don't think about a pink elephant, and like everyone's just going to think of a pink elephant, even though you've told them not to. And like I have to have chocolate like every evening, like it doesn't matter in what form, but like probably previously maybe I'd be like, oh my gosh, I need like a big share bar of chocolate, but it literally can be like one of those like Kinder Maxi bars. I'm obsessed with them at the minute. But you know, it can be something small. Sometimes it's just like that habit of having something sweet after a meal. So maybe like you can work on downsizing that, where you're not feeling deprived of having the nice things that you enjoy eating as well. Or like, do you know the way if you get like say like rich teas or something like that, it's really low calorie, and you're like, oh, I'll have a biscuit after dinner, like I don't know many people who love rich teas like that much. They're like, yes,
let's be honest, it's
delicious.
a pathetic biscuit. People who like a rich tea, they should just not be listening. No,
yeah, exactly. Unless it's topped with, like, well, no, actually, unless it's topped with like Nutella or something like that. But then, you know, there's chocolate hobnobs.
Yeah, absolutely. A hobnob that drinks the tea for you when you dip it in.
Some high risk ones. Actually, my dad always has what's those ones, the flake meal ones, and they're like a half a second dip.
Oh, there's a danger dip.
Sludge.
And I suppose that's Seán, you something else. I'm going to bring us on a different one, and I suppose we've talked on the basics of the struggles I have had for years. You've myth-busted stuff that's been on me for a long time, and the carb thing still recently I've had people saying, and I'm leaning towards the endurance side of things. Yeah. Because ahead of me after this call, I have a 2-hour cycle and a half-hour run to come, and people were saying more fats, less carbs. Unless you're doing a run, maybe have another 20 grams of carbs. And what should people? Because I know a lot of our listeners are into the endurance game. What should people be aiming for? And they're probably doing around what is the best balance for when you're going into that kind of endurance, half Ironman levels or marathon levels?
So sometimes people prefer, or they say they like or feel good having a higher fat, lower carb diet, or doing like kind of like, I suppose, trying to get a little bit fat adapted. So even if you are doing that like low carb or fasted training, your body will be, yes, oxidizing and using more fat. But that doesn't mean that doesn't translate to any performance benefits. So it's just making people aware of that, I suppose, more than anything else. And if you are doing kind of any like train low things throughout the week, you'd want to limit it to 2 a week, and then always have at least a couple of higher carb sessions in and around 2. So for someone who is doing like an Ironman or something like that, they'd be wanting upwards of 6 grams of carbohydrate per kilogram per day, which is loads to get in. So that's where like the honeys, the jams, like the jelly babies are going to be your friend there as well.
Speak my language.
Yeah, it's equivalent like if you have a fire and you've got like coal and it'll roar the fire, or if you use like the damp wood, that kind of the fire still goes, but it's not, you know, it's not burning as bright as what it could, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. It does make, and it's something I've tossed with because I'm a lover of breads. I'm a lover of my rices. I like a curry dinner or a spaghetti or a bolognese, and they're my go-to things. And one thing my philosophy is yes, I can restrict it and I can have more protein or more carb, but then I like to be happy. I'm not training to be punishing myself. So if I can balance both training and food as best.
And I think as well, like people need to realize that I suppose keto is really low amounts of carbs, like below 50 grams of carbs a day, but low carb is classified as less than 120 grams, and one slice of bread has 15 to 20 grams. So even low carb like has a decent amount of carbs compared to what most people would have anyway. So I suppose it's just educating people that. I suppose sometimes people don't like to classify their diet as high carb or like, having loads of carbs in it. So maybe just educating them that actually like, you could have I'm doing this, Miles, it's very difficult. 6 slices of bread and you're still low carb classified.
Oh my God, you've changed my world.
I love bread.
I'm about to go full circle on this, so bear with me in this question. You were talking about there mixing up a little bit, some days having higher carbs and some lower. If you mixed up my runs, I know from my own experience, if I have too many meals beforehand, and you probably know where I'm going with this, and then I'm having that higher carb thing through the day, and if I go for a run in the evening, I'll probably be at least 2K before I come back, and I got to go.
Yeah.
So is that happening because I'm having to, my body's not used to having that much carb stuff before running, or what like, am I messing up my stomach, my system too much, or?
So I suppose it's like everything, like people, if you think about how many times people train a week, so maybe like between like 4 and 6, maybe if people are into it, but they eat at least 21 times a week, but no one really gives as much time to thinking about their nutrition or thinking about their food in and around training. So the important thing with that is to remember that one, you can train your gut. So if you eat something, you're like, geez, like eating before runs is not for me, then you can always tweak that, go for lower amounts and spread out the time before that you'll be having something like that as well, because everyone's different, but usually up to 50% of active people will have like runner's trots, they call it, or like gut issues, whether that be they feel sick or bloated or need the loo or just don't feel like they're really performing that well. But you want to try and, I suppose, just keep practicing and see what works for you. Like if actual food or higher carb foods don't work, then maybe like a smoothie or milk or yogurt or something that'll get digested a little bit quicker might work better. So whenever I worked with those cyclists, like there was 3 of them and they were so different in terms of what they could tolerate. So one had like a stomach of steel, could have eaten a roast dinner and got on the bike. The other towards the end was like jam sandwich, like production line. And then the third one was just on milk. So I suppose it shows like their different levels of tolerance as well. So yeah, it's just try and test. And if you find that that's always happening, then push out what you're eating. So it's maybe like 3 hours before you'd go for a run or 4 hours before, and see if that makes any difference, or go for a smaller amount and then practice again. But generally you want to avoid the 2Fs before like a longer event or more intense. So the fiber and the fats, because they sit in the stomach for a little bit longer. So they'll be gurgling around in there whenever you do start exercising.
And just on that, on milk, I know there has been this other theory about milk being the better than water for recovery and rehydration. Yeah. Is there anything to it?
Yeah, and actually, like there's a really good, if you Google beverage hydration index, there's really good like infographics that come up where milk is actually better than your sports drinks and things like that. So again, like brilliant marketing from the sports drinks. Or if you want to make your own, like if you have like half a pint of water, half a pint of fruit juice and a pinch of salt, then you've got yourself your own made, I suppose, sports drink. But where milk gets the additional benefits is it already has electrolytes in it. It's a fluid, so you're replacing the 2 things you've lost in sweat. So your electrolytes, your fluids, and then it's also got protein and carbs in the perfect ratio to help with glycogen or energy replenishment as well. So it's a good one-stop shop. And actually there's loads of studies on chocolate milk, which people love to hear, because I suppose after like maybe a longer, more intense session, then eating or having something maybe doesn't come to mind or isn't that appealing for a lot of people. So like a cold pint of chocolate milk or something like that can come in really handy. And all the shops have it as well now. So if someone's traveling for their sport or something like that, then it's really easily available too.
That's absolutely music to my ears, but because I wouldn't be a big eater, I would be like that after a long session. I find it very difficult to eat. I know everyone's like, oh, you need to eat straight away. I really can't. It takes like a good hour for me to come down off it. But like that, I'd have a protein shake. And I use it with milk, and I found that has really helped me in the last 6 to 8 months. It's been absolutely amazing for me and something that's worked. But now that I know chocolate milk is on the cards, this is the game.
Really? And especially if someone gets home from work and then they're like, okay, right, I'll have like dinner just the way things work and then I'll train. They don't really want to be having like a big meal and then lying down and going to sleep. So like that's where liquids can come in, I suppose, a bit handier there too.
Brilliant. And to change this again, I suppose, when we're talking about all our myths and everything, when we're looking at the athletic side as well and the longer distance, we spoke about the food, but relative energy deficiency in sports. Something we've come across, and me and Seán have no idea.
Do you want me to take the floor?
That's it. Yes. It's all you.
Okay, so it's easier just if we call it RED. So again, it stands for relative energy deficiency in sport. It used to be referred to as the female athlete triad, because I suppose when females are in kind of lower energy balance or in a larger energy deficit for longer, then they might lose their periods, and that's a big red flag and a big no-no that you want to avoid. But actually previously, maybe for things like ballet, long distance runners, it was kind of a given that like if, years gone past, if you went to your doctor and were like, okay, I've lost my period, and they're like, oh, but you're a runner, so that's kind of expected. But actually, you're a human being and your health is a priority before any sport that you do, because that sport's always going to come to an end at some stage. But actually, after that, if then you finish and you're like, oh yeah, but I love that sport, but you've ended up with osteoporosis, or, you've kind of, I suppose, neglected your health long term, then it's really important that that's highlighted to people. So basically, it's just where your body's in like an energy deficit for too long, where actually you've reduced the energy or maybe increased the activity. So sometimes it can be intentional, where people are restricting their energy intake by load, so by like a really large amount or for a long period of time, where then actually the energy they need for general, I suppose, bodily functions like pumping blood around the body, digestion, keeping you warm, that there is reduced, because actually your body is dipping into that energy pool for the activity that you're asking it to do. So if you think about it, like even if you're exhausted and you went out for a run, you'd still run for a bit. Your body wouldn't just stop you dead and be like, no, you're not going for a run. So it has to then tap into that energy supply for all your, I suppose, healthy bodily functions. The other side of that thing is that actually maybe, say if I started training for a marathon today, didn't change my food at all, but my weight, is stable at the minute, and then I start upping my training loads, don't change my food at all, then then that exercise is dipping into that energy supply for all your other bodily functions. So if you like numbers, so anything below 45 kilocalories per kilogram of fat-free mass is classified as low energy availability, especially, and I suppose dangerously so, is 30 kilocalories per kilogram of fat-free mass. So say if you know your percentage fat or kilograms of fat in your body, you minus that from your weight, times that number by 45, and that's the minimum amount of calories that you would need to be having to be in optimal energy balance. So in males, I suppose that can manifest in different ways. It can mean less morning erections, and also like bone fractures and things like that. So I suppose in some ways females are lucky, because you get that red flag of like, okay, like maybe my menstrual cycle, like it used to come bang on 28 days and now it's coming like 33, 35, it's lengthening out. Or maybe it might drop off completely and you miss it a month, whereas males don't kind of have that heads up. So maybe they're training in really low energy availability, and down the line then they get an injury, and then that's just them out for a couple of weeks or a couple of months. But where I suppose it becomes a bit more important for females to realize is that so like this happened to me, so basically I thought happy days, no period, like great, don't have that little reminder every month. And then I think someone said to me, I was like, you're not worried about your bones or like fertility and something. I was like, what? I was like, sure, I'm like 21, like it doesn't really matter. And like I was studying dietetics, so like I should have known, but like I'm not an athlete. I was just going to the gym, like living in like shared accommodation. But do you know when you get in a rhythm, you can control all your food, like you're just in the zone, I suppose. And then And my BMI was always in the normal range, like my body fat as well. So it can happen to anyone. You can be overweight, you can be obese, like you can, I suppose it just is all about the stresses on the body, whether under eating, over exercising, or just psychological stress as well. So estrogen protects the bone, but if you're not getting a period, your estrogen's really low, so you don't have that bone protection. So after 3 months without a period, if it's to do with energy availability, then your bones kind of become less of a Yorkie and more of a crunchy, if that makes sense. Like they get a bit woolly, which is not what you want. And you can actually, every year without having a period, you can lose 2 to 3% of your bone mass, which is a massive amount. If you think of like runners who've like been running for ages and they're like, oh yeah, like during my like, high competition years when, they were in their peak, that they maybe didn't have a period, or they maybe had 1 or 2 a year, that's a massive detriment to their health. So I suppose when I see people coming to see me and they're like, hey, yeah, we like really want to improve performance, and they're like, oh yeah, but like aren't carbs bad? Or like, I do that's a massive amount that you're telling me to eat there. So I suppose it's educating them actually, like if you have lost your period, if you're in relative energy deficiency, if you're a male and you're lower energy availability for a long period of time, regardless of how much training you do, you'll never reach your optimum performance, because your body can only reach that when everything else, all the other boxes are ticked, like menstruation, bone health, digestion, all those types of things. So quite commonly, we'd see people with it and they'll say like number one is their hands and feet are always freezing, like they can never get heated. They might get a bit of like digestive issues like bloating, constipation, because if you think your gut's a muscle, so the less you use it, the less frequently you use it, and the less energy there is to, I suppose, make it work efficiently, then it's going to slow down and get a bit sluggish. So people might think, oh geez, like I've got IBS or something like that, when actually it's all related to just how much they're eating, I suppose, overall. And it can affect a lot of things. Like sometimes people, if it is unintentional REDS, then there is no disordered eating. But I'd say for the vast majority of people that I see for REDS or loss of periods, that there is definitely an element of disordered eating in there as well. And a good way to think about it, sorry, I'm like yarning on, but I just...
No, this is brilliant.
So basically, a good way to think about it is if your phone's on like 2% battery and you run into the shop and your friend's like, right, I'll pull up here, this is a really busy route, I'll pull up here and call you whenever I'm outside, come out quickly. And you're like, right, okay, go. And then you look down, your phone's on 2% battery and you're in the queue and you're like, oh my gosh, they're going to ring me, and then my phone's going to run out of battery, and then they're going to have to drive on around the town and you're not going to find them. So you X out of all the apps that you don't need, you dim the brightness, and that's kind of what your body does. I suppose your body's your phone, is where it thinks, okay, well, we don't have enough energy for menstruation, we don't really have that much energy for digestion, we don't have that much energy for keeping you warm. So it kind of suppresses them, makes them function on a lower energy, but they're not optimal as well. So you kind of want to, I suppose, restart, re-nourish and kick up the metabolism again, because actually your metabolism will get a bit, like we'll see, like the thyroid function will reduce a little bit as well, where actually your body's doing everything but just on a lower level of energy, so it's not doing it as efficiently as what it could do. But yeah, sorry.
And a follow on to that, does sleep have a factor, or is it more so, would you say it's 80% food related, or is sleep part of it?
It's mostly food related, but actually, like there's a really high, I think it's like 4.6 times more likely to get an injury if your sleep is I think it's below 6 hours a night. And actually the growth hormone peaks after a certain amount of sleep. So if you're always getting broken sleep, or you're kind of sleep deprived, then that will have a big impact on things. But actually REDS can impact on your sleep and make sleep poor, because sometimes people might say, like I wake up in the middle of the night and I'm like ravenous, or I find it hard to get to sleep, but actually maybe their mind's more preoccupied with the food side of things, or maybe haven't eaten enough throughout the day.
So it turns into a slightly vicious cycle. If the food isn't there, it's affecting sleep, and it gets worse and worse.
Yeah, and maybe some sports it's probably more likely. Like if you think about rowing, like you're in skimpy clothing, there's nowhere to hide. Things where it's like weight making sports as well, or just really high level training where there's maybe back-to-back sessions, or the rest and recovery period is really short as well. So I suppose that's where nutrition becomes absolutely key in that.
And for people who are not doing it right, obviously talking to yourself is one way that people can get the best advice on it. But most people are afraid or let's call it, they don't like to part way with money to talk about food, because everyone knows best. But what is the best way for the likes of me going to do an Ironman? What's the best way for me to come up with a plan, or how do I go, or what is the steps I can do to avoid these kind of situations?
So I suppose you want to think about fueling in and around sessions and getting enough just throughout the day. So most people think on rest days, okay, actually I need to eat less here. But if you're training hard, say for an Ironman, your rest day is your recovery day, and recovery needs enough energy as well. So I suppose if you are someone who's active and has a rest day, you're thinking, geez, I don't need to eat this much food. I'm just lying on the sofa all day. But actually your muscles are working to, rebuild the amino acids and things that have been broken down in the previous day as well. And then you want to avoid, if you do feel like you're slipping into that, you want to avoid any fasted activity, because naturally when we get up in the morning time, our stress levels sit a little bit higher, and things that make that go higher are not eating, and also then exercise as well. So then that's just stress, and stress, I suppose, puts the body into that kind of red state as well. So usually I tell people just to Google whatever they are looking for. If they're going to Google anything food, put dietitian at the end of it, and something of better quality should come up usually.
That is the little key bit of advice we were looking for, because you get a nosebleed, you Google it, you're going to die tomorrow, so write your will.
Exactly. Or even I think Sport Ireland have good resources as well. If you just Google it, so it's like Red-S is the name of it, and there's loads of good podcasts. So if you just put in that and then podcasts as well. If I was seeing some obviously I can tell them all this, but it's good for that to be reinforced by some other sources of information. So I always recommend podcasts that people can listen to as well, I suppose, because the things maybe I'm telling them go against everything that they want to or feel that they need to do. Maybe in some cases, you need to reduce the exercise, reduce the high intensity exercise and the running types of activities till we get your body back to where it needs to be. And that can be a really difficult one, because people say, well, actually exercise de-stresses me. But actually when you get down to it, they're stressing so much about trying to fit in that exercise or that level of activity that it actually isn't a de-stressor for them. Walking, yoga would be much better for them at the minute. And it's not to say that that's the way things need to go forever and ever, but it's just until you kind of get out of that, I suppose, energy deficient state.
Wow.
Yeah.
Got a dry mouth after that. I just
to be honest with you, to look back on a lot of the things I've done in both career and training, I've probably found myself in that state. Now that I've been thinking about it, and I was thinking about it as you're saying, I was like, I have definitely put myself into this kind of situation. And
I remember going to a conference, actually, it was a sports nutrition conference, and this girl got up, I wish I could remember her name, but she got up and she was talking about REDS, and she was talking about we use this case study of this 13-year-old runner who goes to school, comes home, runs, then she'll get food, she'll go to bed, she'll study or whatnot, and she's really into her sport, nothing was going to stop her, but she wanted to, back in the day, it was saying the lighter on your feet or the smaller a runner you were, the better you were, or you were praised for that, I suppose, as well. And then at the end of it, she was like, but this same girl had to stop running at the age of 17. And at the age of 17, she had osteoporosis, something that not even her granny had at that stage. So I suppose that's a drastic case, but it can happen, and it does happen, and we see it happening as well. So it is a very real concern.
Well, I suppose you're putting in all that work, and then other people are complimenting, because obviously, you are having so few calories that's kicking in, but you'd have to be losing weight during that. And people are like, oh, geez, you look great. You've lost a lot of weight. And that would spur you on, whether you feel tired or not. You're like, oh, geez, I'm on the right track. I just got to keep on going.
Exactly. And I think there was actually a runner called, I think she's Australian, Sarah Bartholomew, potentially. She put up a really good Instagram post in and around Eating Disorders Week. And it all was about how she was praised for being so lean in her best physical condition. And actually she was like, if I was honest with myself at that stage, I was in the worst health condition I could have been at that stage. But when you get that positive reinforcement, you think, oh, actually, no, like I need to keep, what would they think if I stopped running? Or like I'll be really lazy if I don't do any activity and those types of things as well. So that's where I suppose like therapy and counselling, that side of things have become really important too, just to help deal with that side of things too.
Yeah, I always,
phenomenal.
Yeah, 100%. I always say, just to finish that out, I understand guys and stuff, that the when the bodybuilders up on stage and they look incredible shape and all the rest, and they paint themselves to tan and whatever, and it's like they up there on stage are at their absolute weakest. Like they will find that they're so dehydrated, they'll find it so hard to get up those steps to just stand there, and the pose takes up all the energy. It's kind of like, you want to look like that, but you want to look so weak you can barely make it up the stairs. You have to be helped get upstairs and stuff. Like there is a sort of balance. Kathryn, that was unbelievable. I kind of had to just shut up there the last 15-20 minutes because there's so much. I've never been so much out of my depth before on this podcast. But that was genuinely unbelievable. I have to listen back to that again myself, take notes on that one just from my own background. Fantastic. Eric,
I think it's one of those things, like when I became a dietitian, I was like, oh, I really want to like work in weight loss, like love that side of things. And then actually, I suppose like people always say, oh, you'll find like what area lights you up or like you're most interested in. And I think just because I experienced that side of things, and also because like so many young girls come to us and like, you know, it's 15, 16, you shouldn't be worrying about half the stuff that they're worrying about or missing out on like their childhood just for the sake of, you know, looking thinner or smaller and those types of things as well. And also like it's a nice job whenever you're like trying to help people to eat more as opposed to eat less, I suppose, as well.
And it is a fantastic way to put it as well, because everything out there, and we're surrounded by social media, and it's probably the most hurtful thing for people's self-esteem, ironically enough, and it's all about eating less and diets and look skinny and look like this.
And the before and after pictures, like someone's after could be someone's before, and like I suppose it's a difficult one to navigate those side of things, because even if you recover from an eating disorder, everyone always talks about weight, everyone always talks about like which diet should be best. Like on the news, there's always some new headline, in the newspapers there's always some new headline as well. So it does take a lot of mental strength to just be like, no, like this is my path, this is my body, this is my food, and it's not applicable to everyone else, or you know, there's no blanket recommendations as well.
Yeah, and it's definitely an individual thing, to an individual taste as well, and work them in the right ways, and be happy with your choices. Like last night, I have no problem. I had a Big Mac last night and I loved every bite.
Yeah.
And it's in years ago I was a bigger guy, and to come to this stage now where I'm happy to accept I'll eat a Big Mac because I know the work I've put in, and in actual fact I probably still didn't eat enough calories, you know, like it's with work and stuff. So it's so hopefully there is a nice message out there. Have you any final messages for anyone who's maybe struggling, or to wrap up, have you any final messages to kind of give to people a bit of advice and how best to go about their day?
I suppose number one would be to, if you wouldn't say it to your friend, then don't say it to yourself or about yourself, because you wouldn't, like, people talk so negatively about themselves or to themselves or beat themselves up, but they would never dream of saying that to anyone else. So actually, you know, there's no way that you should be saying those things to yourself. And also to get in contact with someone who has a background in working with people who maybe have what they're struggling with as well.
Yep. Unbelievable at the end of Kathryn. That was phenomenal. We genuinely could have you on for another hour. Definitely some stage soon you'll get an email for a part 2, hopefully. So Kathryn, thanks again for this podcast. Really, really insightful, really helpful. I'm 100% sure people listening got benefit out of that. So with that said, guys, we're going to wrap up this episode of the podcast. Thank you once again for listening to this week's episode of the Any Given Monday podcast from myself, Eric, and Kathryn. Take care.